Okay, coming to final fast-track interviews. Again, this really varies between firms. Some firms will give you your final interview during an internship, some will give it to you a few weeks afterwards, but there are a few bits of advice that are quite general regardless. With firm and career motivation questions, so why do you want this job, why do you want to work at this firm, which we've discussed in more detail on the answering applications and interviews video, your answer needs to be much more comprehensive, a much deeper understanding. You need to draw upon your experiences, talk about the people you've met, the types of work you've done, and really give a strong answer for why you want to do that. Just referring to marketing material on the website and things like that just will not be good enough at this stage. Have a thorough understanding of the work you've done, so you could, as I mentioned earlier, keep a diary. So you remember at the end, especially at the end of 10 weeks, it might be quite difficult to remember some of the pieces of work you did at the start. Be aware of confidentiality with where you record this, and especially with the interviewers as well. Maybe keep it fairly general, maybe not talking about client names if it's not public knowledge. But have a thorough understanding of it, the technical elements, the wider context, and that will show that you've taken an interest throughout. The firm might ask you for feedback, so what you've enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed. If you've done other internships with law firms, for instance, you might do, as Neil said, 3 back-to-back. They might ask you to compare your experiences in detail, so you need to be able to really differentiate the firm from its competitors at this stage. And also prepare questions. You could ask the firm about future strategies or industry challenges, something about the culture, the training. Have personal opinions ready again, and that will hopefully hold you in good stead, but make sure you really prepare.
So each firm and firms in different industries will have different ways of doing their final interviews, as Jake mentioned. So the most important thing to remember is don't expect, no matter how well your internship has gone, or how well you think you've done, or how good the feedback you've got is, that it's just a formality that you just have to go through. Retain that professionality the whole way through. And like Jake said, build on the experience that you've had on the internship. Make sure you do things during the scheme which you know you can then later talk about at an interview that will impress someone at the end of the time that you're there, to show that you have a deeper understanding of what it takes to succeed at that firm, and that firm is right for you if that's the case that it's going to be.
I think something I would like to add that I didn't expect in my final interviews was to actually reflect on the internship itself. Like the partners who interviewed me were asking, what do you think we could have done better with the scheme? Which part did you like with the internship? Which kind of threw me off a bit because I wasn't really sure if it was okay to criticise aspects of the internship. But so don't just reflect on your work, also reflect on what you found, just the structure in general, and what you got to do, what you got to see, or what you would like to learn more about the firm, because that also shows that you actually are interested, because you actually thought that, oh, I missed out on this, so maybe you could tell more about it. I guess it kind of aligns with what to ask them, but just keep in mind that you might get asked on that kind of area as well.
Well, personally, I didn't really have any final interviews, so what I had instead was a weekly interview with my supervisor at the end of the week. And I think it's very important at these kind of quite intimate sessions with your supervisor to make sure that he understands that you have a strong desire to work for his team. Or if you don't, then it's very good to make it clear to him that you might want to switch out to another team or try something new. Because that's really the best way to get information out. If it's like an intimate environment between just you and your supervisor, it's probably much better than saying to everyone else in the team. But at the same time, you got to gauge how much you trust him, or how much he likes you, to kind of make that honest reflection to him as well.
So drawing what Jake said about making your answers more extensive from an internship interview to the end of the sort of final interview for the job. So for example, if you said before for your internship interview, I really love the teamwork that you say you've got here, collegiality or whatever. When you're on the internship, how did you experience that? So whether it be coming towards the end of a deal, all parts of the team would help each other, even if they weren't set that particular work, but they helped someone else. Or perhaps, for me, for example, I talked about how the London and New York office worked together, calling each other. And then talking about if you did different internships, then you'll be asked to differentiate, but never put down the other firm. Don't say you didn't like the people or anything like that. Just differentiate from the point of view that different sort of work they do, clients, international offices. And also, finally, you will be asked about the work you've done. And one thing which I learned was that I went into one of my interviews with a very sort of specific task in mind that I was going to talk about with the work that I'd done. But one of the people interviewing me, she was in a different department and said, well, what did you do in my department while I was sat there? And I didn't fully understand that sort of work. So make sure you understand all the work you've done and are prepared to talk about anything that you've done on the internship.
Final thoughts, and I learnt this personally. The city is very small. People take the same transport, they eat in the same places. Don't say things you wouldn't want the firm to hear. So I was talking about my previous internship experiences in a restaurant with a friend, and it just so happens an associate from the firm I was next interning at was sitting next to me on the table. Remembered the conversation, remembered that I'd had that conversation, and luckily I hadn't said anything bad. I just talked fairly neutrally about my experiences, but kind of joked around with me during my internship afterwards about that. But it made me realise how true this is. Graduate recruiters can move between firms. I've certainly noticed that happens quite a lot, and therefore if you say something unwarranted in one internship, that might reflect badly on a graduate recruiter who will move to another firm who then in the future might not want to give you the same opportunity. Other interns could be your future colleagues, so treat them well. These guys were mentioned earlier that talking badly about interns behind their back or whatever it may be could give rise to a long-lasting grudge with someone that you might end up working with for decades afterwards. And also, as we mentioned, a wide variety of employees provide feedback, so just always beware of what you're saying. So lots of further reading on citycourierseries.com, check out the publications for other tips and advice. Hopefully you found this useful.